What up, HyperChange? Welcome to another episode. I'm here in San Francisco at a beta apartment of a startup called Bumblebee Spaces with the CEO and founder, Sankarshan. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Gally. Pretty stoked to be on HyperChange.
Yeah, so I heard about Bumblebee Spaces about a month ago when I was interviewing Gene Munster, venture capitalist, former Apple analyst, and he mentioned Bumblebee Spaces, your company, as something that he was super excited about. And the second I heard about Bumblebee Spaces, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, but sort of my understanding of what you're trying to do is have people think about real estate in a new way, not just square footage, but in cubic footage.
Right.
So you have these crazy products that basically put your bed into your ceiling and allow you to store all these things in your ceiling and maximize your space, which I think as people live in urban environments like this, the pain point's only increasing. So I'm just super excited about the potential of this. So maybe before we get too much into Bumblebee, you could describe, what's your background? How did you get the expertise to go into something like this?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, and shout out to Gene. He's one of our early believers, and he always totally enjoyed talking to him. It's funny, like when other investors call me, I'm like ready with product update, company update, business up. Like when I talk to Gene, it's like, hey, how are you doing? Like totally changes the tone. He's an awesome guy. So yeah, my background, I'm from product background. I engineer by training. Originally from India, then I came to East Coast. I went to University of Maryland, did my master's there, and right after that, I worked at Black & Decker doing power tools, product development, the DeWalt brand, which is like the 20-volt lithium-ion powered power tool. So I learned a lot about kind of like, that was the time when NiCad batteries were getting phased out and going into lithium. So all the battery stuff that were kind of got exposed at Tesla, I got kind of the early beginnings of that at Black & Decker. After Black & Decker, like Apple recruited me, I moved to the West Coast, worked on the watch for 4 years while I was at Apple, then followed my boss from Apple to Tesla. Tesla was amazing. It was one of those really, the culture, the purpose, and how Tesla operates, it's at a whole new level. And
the HyperChangers love Tesla. So I think you got to let us know, what did you do at Tesla, or what were you working on?
So I was in a group called Product Technologies, and everyone in the team is a product technologist. So basically, it's a special projects group. The way I describe it is, Elon has like very ambitious ideas on how to how the car should be built, how, like, either on the manufacturing side, on the design side, on the automation, or generally like how things could be and would be. And some of it he talks about it in like on his board of directors, the shareholders talk he was talking about the Dreadnought factory, which internally they the code name for it, the Dreadnought factory, which is very like architecturally rethinking the whole factory and the product at the same time. So I worked on some of those like special projects, super exciting stuff, and I think some of it are going to be making its way into like Model Y and beyond.
And so then what led you from going to Tesla towards getting into Bumblebee Spaces? And I'm curious, like, what was the aha moment of how you decided to start this concept?
I think in general, like I wanted to work on housing right after I moved from East Coast to West Coast. I was pretty, like when I was in East Coast, I working at Black & Decker, my home was kind of a beta test ground for like various power tools. Like interns would come and tear down my house, rebuild it,
That sounds fun.
Yeah, it was one of those like constantly project houses. So I understood the bill of materials of how a house is built, which is very simple, and houses are built very simply, like and you can't optimize on materials anymore. You can't buy a cheaper 2x4 or cheaper drywall or cheaper nails. These are as optimized as it can get, and every house for generations have been built the same way. And when I moved to West Coast, I realized the rent I'm paying, it's all about dollar per square feet, right? Like you move from East Coast to West Coast, you realize it's such a high spike in rent. and just started getting creative with space. And at first it was one of these, let's start using attic and like storage units and off-site storage and things like that. And then you start like, why do we have all this stuff? Start questioning your, like, we've been consuming too much. When I first came to this country, I had just a suitcase. Now not even a U-Haul can fit all my stuff. So what am I doing? So it was becoming like an existential crisis for me about housing. And I was just getting creative constantly about how to approach it. And I always like to tell the story, like, you put engineers into a tight space, they'll find options to get around it. It kind of started up like that, but when I had kids, I used to watch these Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, the cartoons.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of sparked the thing, thought in me where, like, the same footprint keeps changing. Goofy wants to cook, it's a kitchen. Oh, Donald wants to play some captain game, and it looks like a boat. It just constantly changes, and it's the same footprint that's changing, and there's a robot running around, like, helping out. And I wanted to kind of build that version of it. And it was a very ambitious undertaking. And so Tesla is pretty life-consuming, and rightfully so. It's a fun place to work, but it requires a lot of attention. Mm-hmm. And my detox was to come and just like tinker with a side project whenever I could. And I started building this in the garage.
And so Bumblebee is what I find so fascinating, especially on a higher level about these type of businesses, is that it's such a simple concept of like, hey, there's some space on the ceiling, like let's use it. But actually, the technology to actually implement that and make it seamless into people's everyday life, like there's so much technology. Like I'm here and I'm looking at like when the box comes down, there's like all these gadgets and gears and cameras and sensors in the corner of the room. There's all of these sensors going on. So like what kind of technology is going on to power all this? Because it seems incredibly complicated.
Yeah, I mean, it's complex, yet you're right. It's like so simple. Like, there's a ceiling's very interesting because there's already building codes around ceiling. We hang like garage doors and light fixtures and sometimes water heaters and all these things hang off of ceiling already. So there's already a bunch of building codes on what kind of load, what kind of power, how far from sprinklers, HVAC, all that needs to be looked at. And once you stay within these the constraints of the building code, you can start like really realizing the value, right? So there are these fake attic type of accessories that you can buy. You can go to Home Depot and buy these things that'll like spin with your hand. It'll go take your stuff up, put it in a Rubbermaid bin. The whole epiphany was when you put things away, it becomes a big cognitive load. And we didn't want to build a hoarding space. We didn't want to build a space where it's just you put it, you forget about it, and it's just like cold storage. In fact, like when I started questioning the whole, what am I owning? Why do I own it? It kind of like made sense for me to, when I put things away, there should be a digital version of it that I can search, I can get it, it should not be just, a hoarding space.
Yeah.
We want it to be like useful space. In fact, this room, which is being used by a resident, we can see active usage. He puts everything, you can see like he's a pretty minimalist. There's not much in the room, but he has stuff. He has actually, I would say he has more stuff than I do for amount of clothes and all that. And he's actively using Bumblebee to bring it, retrieve it, put it away, and he lives in this open, spacious place.
Yeah, so maybe build on that. Like, it's one thing to be able to maximize the space on your ceiling and just have more space. That's obviously huge, but this theory of indexing your stuff and sort of Bumblebee categorizing, here's all your items, here's where they are, how does that come back to the consumer as an advantage or a better like home experience?
Right, exactly. So I love that home experience, because homes have been built with every function gets added on the floor, and it's just spreads out, and you need access for it, and everything's spreading out in rooms or specific, like put a dining table, you need like access to the dining table, and everything's lost around it. So when I think about Bumblebee, the future of how people will be living, there's a AI butler living in your ceiling and taking care of all your stuff. Like it knows what you own, and it knows what you needed. So let's say I'm going to a meeting, and it's this meeting which I have with a specific type of customer, and this is the type of work I'll be discussing with them. It'll bring down my right notebook, it'll bring down my dress shoe, it'll bring down my the right kind of outfit that I want to wear. It's just like it's like Batman's butler hands him the stuff that he needs for the day, and when he comes home, just puts it away. It's just like Bumblebee takes it away. So because of this indexing, we can like run these cool services, which becomes this contextually just gives you when you want it. Rest of the time it's away. So it's kind of poetic. It just gives you when you want it. Rest of the time it disappears. And kind of like on a second layer, if you imagine a building full of bumblebees, you can start thinking about, hey, do I have a power strip I'm doing, I need to plug in these camera lights, whatever. No, but your neighbor is sitting on a power strip that he hasn't used for 3 months or whatever. You can start creating a borrow-lend between neighbors, which can be very subtle, like without any cognitive load to the neighbor. Like I don't have to go take a picture of it, put it online and say, I'll let you borrow it, come and find it in my house. None of that, right? So I can just go in, only get my power strip and come out without any, like you can set up securities. You can say kids can't get into medicine cabinet. These are my private stuff, like only special Face ID to get into that. You can set up securities and sharing. You can do some really interesting long tail stuff with inventory.
Yeah, fascinating. And so, I mean, this grand vision like sounds so exciting, but it's almost like so far away. So I'm curious, like Bumblebee, you're a startup. Like I believe that you only started this maybe a year or two ago.
Yeah, it's about a year and a half now since the company's like incorporated. Okay, I was tinkering in the garage for maybe 4 or 5 months before that. Okay,
and that's and then you've raised a couple $1 million, and so I'm curious, like, or maybe you could talk about you guys have raised
like 4.6 million at this point. So we've like raised a seed round, and like initially there was a pre-seed which got us kind of going on what is the product, what is the market, how do we break in, because it was. Initially it was just like a epiphany of, okay, on first principles, it makes sense. Why aren't we using full volumetric space instead of just two-dimensional living, right? But after that, we started kind of like building around, thinking more around what are these modules, what are they going to do, and then on kind of the layers of how to deploy it. Like the go-to-market has been, like we've constantly evolved. Like initially, because I was building it for myself, I thought it'll be like a direct-to-consumer storage in the ceiling, storage in the cloud, and that's kind of like we sell these modules individually to homeowners.
Interesting.
And then we kind of like, we as we started talking to people, we realized the people who really value space and can put a number on it are the real estate owner-operators. They know they look at a space, they're like, okay, this unit, this zip code within this distance, that's 1250 per square foot, like very clear. So they know the value of space very well, and they kind of pulled it out of our hands initially. So we have 3 different classes of customer, like employee housing, multifamily, co-living, like different types of customer. We're also talking to some retail, different classes of customer, and they all realize the value same way. Like they have reasonable ceiling space, which they don't use at all, and we come and deploy it within hours. Our goal is to be, like right now we take 4 to 5 hours to install all the hardware, but our goal is to be under an hour. Just come, put these anchors up, robot slides in, and it's good to go.
Yeah. And so when you think about like scaling a business like this, that's where to me it's like I have so many questions of like, how do you like scale that? Because it's not just software. It's like you really have to go into someone's room and build all this. So how are you thinking about actually scaling this to where, like, if you're a venture-backed company, you've got to get really, really big. So how does this scale to?
So the way we've kind of like right from design and how we've thought about it is very like product approach to this build. So instead of thinking it like cabinets or closet where a carpenter has to come in, measure, cut everything, and then come back, install it, build it there, put doors, paint, all this. Like there's so much local labor that needs to happen to put one set of cabinet or closet in, versus we've modularized this to a point where everything's a product. So essentially the only thing we have to do, we don't even have to measure the ceiling because every ceiling's essentially the same flat plane, and we know based on building codes where the how much load it can take, how far our anchor system needs to be. So the biggest currently our biggest labor is just putting those anchors up. So we come, install these anchors, and everything's modularized where we just slide, and lock it in place, sensors calibrated, and that's it.
Wow. And so do you have any data on like how much like a system like this would cost for an apartment? Or like...
Yeah. So we've been so it depends like number of modules and the layout of the space and what best makes the impact. But it ranges, like the initial install cost ranges between $6,000 to $10,000, which is basically the cost of furnishing the place. Like sometimes it's less, right? The cost of furnishing, adding a closet or a cabinet itself can be way more than that.
Yeah.
So like we want to like minimize this adoption friction and basically get it to customers, get it to the consumers to actually make the space more affordable. So between $6,000 to $10,000, we deploy this depending on the options and number of configurations to select, and then we take over kind of monthly maintenance and liability, privacy, all that. Like we are fully responsible for everything in the ceiling.
And I love the vision you were talking about earlier, the virtual butler. And so I'm curious, like if I was like a VC or someone trying to invest in Bumblebee, like what kind of numbers are you giving to get them excited? Because I almost feel like in the future, it seems inevitable that even if you're not crunched on space, you would want to have a Bumblebee system somehow installed. So
exactly,
this is almost like for every living space. Like, do you have any like market size data or any like how do you frame that?
Yeah, so yeah, it's a good question. When you look at housing as a market, or the market size is so big that it doesn't make sense to say, oh, it's $1 trillion market we'll take to. Instead, we are approaching it like a very ground up. Okay. We're gonna go into multifamily that have 9-foot or higher ceiling initially. So like like specifically, we don't want to take on projects, like one 1940s Cape Cod home or one split level 1970s home. Like each one becomes a project, and we don't want to take on that. Instead, we want to go where we can start scaling at 10, 20, 30 units at a time. Okay. So right now we're at the process where we're unlocking customers who are multifamily. Could be, some of them are thousands of homes, some of them are a few hundred homes, and we know what their blueprint, what the build quality of their homes are, how they maintain it, how they operate it, and support wise everything's like in one place, geographically constrained. So it's much more easier for us to deploy across buildings. And we also, this network effects of sharing and maintenance, like there's a lot of cool network effects that kick in once more than 2-3 people start using it. You'll start seeing like a really cool network effect kick in, so which we're starting to just realize now. So our goal is, so the market size wise, in short, there's about just in top 5 productive cities, there's something like 15 million potential install homes that we can get into.
Wow. Huge market.
And
so maybe I'm curious to wrap it up. Is there anything we should be looking for, watching that's coming out from Bumblebee, or let's say a HyperChanger wants this in their apartment? what can they, like, how far away is that from being a reality? And
yeah, so I mean, if you're living in Seattle or San Francisco, we are already in those two markets.
Okay.
So Seattle is a brand new install. It's actually our next gen install after this one that's just coming online. Downtown Seattle.
So is that like one apartment building, every apartment has Bumblebee, or just one unit? Or
so right now we started off with the first unit, but
okay.
yeah, we're working on like deploying across multiple units there.
And so then someone could literally, like today, if I wanted that apartment, it was open still.
Yeah.
You could go rent
Yes.
and have a Bumblebee apartment.
Yeah, we'll be doing
That's
a
pretty
open.
So it's in the wild, basically.
It's in the wild.
Cool.
Yeah. So is this one. This one is rented out already. Right now, if you're in Bay Area, like San Francisco Bay Area or Seattle, Greater Seattle area, reach out. Go to our website, bumblebeespaces.com, and we'll kind of like we're making a list of like early adopters, and we're actually stopping beta shipments after, like, we have 2 more commitments. After that, we're kind of pausing beta where our industrial design and interaction design work has already started. So we'll be doing a lot of like basically product design, making sure it's like ready for mass production, it's looking beautiful, it just works reliably, like all that stuff.
Really quick, how many people are working for Bumblebee? Because I think this is such a new company, but it's such a complex thing, and like much progress has been made that it's sort of like, that's what I'm really impressed by. So like, how big is the team?
Yeah, it's 8 of us now, and it's mind blowing.
Only 8 people.
Only 8 people, and it's mind blowing how fast we've taken it, and it's funny. Like I've worked on some really awesome products in my past, and this team, like the speed at which they've operated and how they've cranked. I mean, if there's one thing I've done right, it's just like get the team together,
Yeah, awesome. That is so great to hear. So, thank you so much for coming on HyperChange. I think this was awesome, and for all the HyperChangers out there, I think Bumblebee Spaces is a fascinating company to watch. I'm super bullish and excited to see what happens, and hopefully one day my apartment will have Bumblebee too. And I just think this is a fascinating, like sort of real world example of how using such complex technology like AI, robotics, software, you're leveraging all of these like buzzwordy trends, but turning it into such a simple product to maximize ceiling space. Like I just love it. So it's awesome.
Awesome.
So thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
Maybe we'll do it again soon.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you.